Hello out there. Today I am going to be talking to you about the Crow Tarot by MJ Cullinane. I just finished using this deck for my personal journaling work for the last month, so I have become very acquainted with it. And the reason I got this deck is because one, I love MJ Cullinane's artwork, and I adore crows. Um, but I'm finding myself only liking this deck, and I like it a lot, but I don't love it. And for some reason, I anticipated myself loving it, but I just really like it. Um, is this going to be a deck in my regular rotation? No, but I will be using it for specific purposes, and I do foresee it staying with me for some time to come, if not in my permanent collection. But I can't really quite put my finger on where the disconnect is for me, but it is there. It is a deck that is inspired by the Rider-Waite-Smith, and I do personally find some of the cards to be a bit more effective than others. Having good foundational knowledge of the RWS will make reading this relatively easy, but in my opinion, inexperienced readers with minimal foundational knowledge may find it to be a bit murkier. The cardstock is typical for MJ Cullinane if you're acquainted with the Urban Crow Tarot or the Forhaxa. It's that same kind of cardstock. It is on the slippery side, and it is oversized. So somebody with smaller hands may have a little bit more trouble handling this deck. The borders are all different shades of white. The colors are a more muted neutral pattern, or I'm sorry, color palette, which I really like. And I do like that the borders are all different colors. It feels a little bit more organic that way. I really do appreciate that about this deck. The guidebook, I wish the guidebook would have better I wish the guidebook would have better explanations of her artistic interpretation of the cards and why she did some of the things she did. The book just feels to be lacking a little bit. Because some of the cards I kind of wonder, like, where where is this coming from? One of them I eventually figured out, but some of them I don't understand, and I looked in the book hoping it would be there, but it wasn't. So with that said, I'm going to stop rambling at this point. Hold on, sorry, I'm thinking at the same time. Yeah, see here in the Fool, there's lotus flowers. I'm used to seeing these in the Ace of Cups in the Rider-Waite-Smith, so I'm curious as to why they were put in the Fool in the beginning. I mean, I suppose if it's about, rebirth, I can understand this being that, but we do see the lotus flowers sprinkled throughout this deck. So anyway, there's really no explanation in here as to why there are lotus flowers in the Fool. So I think that's why I'm saying if you have a good foundational knowledge of the Rider-Waite-Smith, you can understand how to take that symbol and apply it to this deck. But if you're not really accustomed to that or have an understanding of that, the deck may be a bit murkier and read sort of flat. So anyway, okay, enough rambling. Let's move on to the majors. Okay, so here we are with the majors, and I did take notes this time so I don't forget anything. Because sometimes when I'm doing these videos, I end up forgetting to say something that I wanted to, and then I'm like, should I remake the video? And the reality is I'm not going to remake the video. So I took notes this time. I was very productive. So here is the Fool. We will start with that. This is a very different Fool from the Rider-Waite-Smith. It feels to me like this crow is taking a solid, calculated risk instead of just throwing caution to the wind, where on the Rider-Waite-Smith, it can feel like that Fool is throwing caution to the wind. He's ready to just jump off a cliff with no parachute or anything to save him. But this crow is on a log, and should something go wrong, he has the ability to fly away and start again, right? So he's on the water, and it feels like this journey, maybe an emotional one, and it's signifying a new beginning and um, moving off into the unknown, away from the comfort of his flock. So that's a bit different from the Rider-Waite-Smith. It even looks very different from the Rider-Waite-Smith. The magician, he has all of his tools like we would normally see, but it feels like he's only taking his wand to me. Like it feels like he's chosen the wand and he's taking off with it. So this is sort of like he's taking action, but he's forgetting all of these other things behind, right? He's using the wand to transform his ideas into reality, but by doing so, it feels like he's ignoring all of these other tools that are needed. So this feels like a miss to me. In the Rider-Waite-Smith, we see the magician holding the wand, but he's connected to these tools still in a way because they're on the table in front of him. And it feels like he's sort of, hovering over him, where I guess you can say that for this as well. But to me, it just feels like a disconnect between the crow taking flight and the tools that are beneath him. And to me, it feels like the crow's leaving him behind. So this was a bit of a miss for me. But the high priestess actually feels more like the magician to me. You take away that veil, and the pomegranates, I would have told you that this is the magician. It very well could have been, but I do like that the sword is pointing toward the pomegranate here. This suggests to me that as we begin to unearth what is unseen, we have to invoke the ideas and concepts needed in order to plant those seeds so that when we get to the Empress, they can be fertilized. Um, Here you see that the crow is sitting on top of the cup and the wand, almost like she is trying to fertilize it. She's invoking the ideas. She's working through her thoughts to figure out what she needs to do to make the most of them, to make them grow, so that when moving forward, there will be it won't just be an idea. She can bring those ideas into reality. So that moves into the Empress, and this feels like an after effect of intellectual invocation. It's like she was driven to create a more fertile world for herself, and she did nurture this to reality. So it's almost like this crow is sitting on her nest here, and then this is the fruits of her labor come to life. So the cup and the wand that we see her sitting on here is now free here, right? So she has nurtured those concepts and ideas to reality. This emperor to me feels very strong, very driven, very determined. The mountains here to me suggest a lot of rigidity. And the ram's head feels like he is harnessing the fiery Aries energy in an intellectual, detached manner, especially, having these two combined together, juxtaposed. Is that the right way to use juxtaposed? Anyway, it just feels like he's detached. There's a lack of warmth in this emperor. I do feel like in the Rider-Waite-Smith, even though there's a lot of rigidity in that card as well, I feel like that emperor is emanating just a touch bit more warmth. This card feels very cold, but this emperor feels like a very strong, fiery ruler who gets what he wants, and he takes heads as he goes. If you've seen any of my other deep dive videos, you will notice that on some of them, the high priestess and the empress really balance out each other, and the emperor and the hierophant really balance out each other, and they definitely, both of them, feel the masculine and the feminine. But here, the hierophant and the emperor do not feel connected to me. The Hierophant here feels more connected to the lovers. Um, and it feels like this is a marriage ceremony. So perhaps this is trying to convey that the key, right, to moving forward is the marriage of the dual aspects of ourselves. And the key is in this doorway. So it's almost like you have to go through the doorway to get to the other side. Turn my pages so I don't lose my notes. All right. So here's the lovers, and this is like after the marriage, and there's a choice to be made, right? Stay balanced and continue to work on the unknown. And if you don't feel like you have to do that, or you're like, okay, I'm good now, I'm balanced, and that you don't need to go any further, it feels like there is this separation. So where here it feels like they're doing this hard work to stay balanced and stay married to the ideals that they now have. These two up here feel like they're beginning to segregate again and separate again, and one is going back to suppressing what is unseen so they can just live in the sun in this happy little world that they've created for themselves where they don't have to actually feel. So there's a choice here. Do you want to stay as you were, or do you want to dive in and progress in a healthier way? Which leads to the Chariot. If should you take this mission, um, this is suggesting of having stayed the course to continue to fly off into the unseen world that we have hidden from ourselves. So this is a journey into the unknown to make what is unseen, allow it to see the light of day so that we can integrate all parts of ourselves. So the Strength and Hermit, um, pretty straightforward. The Wheel of Fortune, I had been wondering, like, why did the artist choose a scorpion, and where is the eagle? But when I got to the world card, it was explained in the world, because the scorpion's here too, that these are the four fixed astrological signs. So it is Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio. So I figured that part out. The book did tell me that. Justice, I thought, was interesting because the sword is pointed downwards and the crow is blindfolded, which makes me feel like the truth cannot or isn't being seen after the turning of the wheel. So the book maintains the traditional meaning of this card, and it doesn't explain to me why they chose to have a downturned sword and a blindfolded crow. And this actually feels like a bit like you're not seeing the truth. So it feels like a more negative aspect of justice to me. But this does feel like the effects of what happens when we don't see the truth, or we try to blah, blah. This is what happens when we don't see the truth, or we choose not to balance out our karma or go forward in a more balanced way, and we're fighting against it, right? Surrender at this point is the only way out, which leads you to death. And this, I do feel there's a beautiful flow between these two cards. Like, you just have to surrender and let things end. Let things end. Let the past end, so you can change and bring in change effectively. It sounded really better in my head, and I couldn't get my words out. So here we see the crow dies, but it's rising again out of its ashes, ushering in a new way of being. Temperance is doing temperance things. It maintains the irises in here, which I like. The devil to me actually feels like the dark side of the emperor. Can you see that? I feel like this is the dark side of the emperor. And sort of what happens if you don't allow yourself to feel anything. So I found that to be really interesting. Tower is pretty straightforward. What I really liked about the star is the crow is bathing in this water to wash away the negative and to be able to embrace the new. It sort of feels like a ritual cleansing. And I like that about the star. Um, the moon allows us to reflect upon what may still need to be integrated and unlocked. So we still have to unearth what may be suppressed after this entire journey that we've been on. We've done the work, and now it's up to us to sort of bring the finale to it, right? If we still have anything locked up in a cage, this is the point where we have to unlock it. And then the sun and judgment, pretty straightforward. And the world, we see the turning stop, and the crow has achieved victory and a connection to the divine, to God, whatever you may call that higher consciousness. So that is the major arcana, and next we will move on to the pentacles. All right, here we are at the pentacles, ace through king. I would say that the ace through the four is pretty straightforward. The five of pentacles, this to me feels like these two crows were kicked out of their flock and now have to make their own way without the help of the others. And this can lead to a feeling of destitution. And I think that's pretty effective. I actually kind of like this five of pentacles. It really visually gives you the feeling of being left out in the cold, where all these crows have everything and they've been left with nothing. But I'm on the fence about this six of pentacles. Is this crow with the scales, is he sharing or is he stealing? And I sort of see where it's going in regards to balance. These crows have a fish and this crow has a fish, but it just doesn't feel reciprocal to me. And if these two crows are the crows in this five, are one of them taking the fish, or is somebody stealing from them, right? They've already been kicked out of the tree, and now they have to deal with somebody else stealing from them, which is going to lead them to feeling pretty bad again. I don't know. It just doesn't really quite work for me. Where, because sixes tend to be about victories and overcoming adversity and challenges, this doesn't feel like that to me. So I feel like this is a big mess. The six of pentacles is a bit of a miss to me. Let's see, the seven. The author has this card written as a period of rest after hard work, but sevens seem to be about challenges and learning how to understand one's limitations and where they may lie. So for me, there's also a bit of a disconnect in here. Not as much as the six, because I can make this work, because I have a knowledge of the Rider-Waite-Smith. But again, I'm not a huge fan of this seven. I wouldn't say sevens are like huge challenges, but they're meant to help us understand where our limitations may lie, at least how I read it. So to me, this didn't work out so well. The eight is hard work. And I like that there's birds flying up here. This one actually works for me because it's sort of showing that sometimes we have to ignore the things we want to do, like flying with our flock, in order to do the hard work to get to where we want to be. So sometimes we have to sacrifice and give something up in order to get to the place where we want to go and achieve our goals. 9 and 10 ring true. Here's our lotus flowers once again, which could be saying that, like, when you're comfortable financially, or in regards to having a stable home life, it's easy to begin again. It's easy to do whatever you want to do because you have something to fall back on. The court cards are all bland. I did not really feel a connection to these court cards at all. I do feel like the Knight of Pentacles is the closest. being and blah, 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 the closest to the Rider-Waite-Smith. But don't these just feel like they're lacking in richness? It just feels like it's lacking in the richness that the Pentacle King and Queen should be sitting in. It does. There is a lotus flower, and there's one bunch of grapes or two bunch of grapes, but like it just doesn't feel rich to me. So the court cards don't work so well in the pentacles for me, but those were the pentacles, and let's move on to the cups. Here are the cups, ace through king. Let me see. The ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, all pretty consistent with the Rider-Waite-Smith, so will be relatively easy to read, though the 3 does feel a little lacking in abundance. You know, usually we're used to seeing the merriment of 3 people celebrating union, but they feel a little bit separate here, but not a big deal. But the 6, there's not really much here to speak to the nostalgia that this card can usually evoke. The book has to explain why it's nostalgic because it's not really apparent in the imagery. So that's a big miss for me. Yeah. I mean, it's the 6 of Cups. If you know what the 6 of Cups means, you're not going to have an issue. But if you don't, there's really not much to go on visually. And I'm a visual reader. So I know some people read differently, but I'm a visual reader. So when I'm reviewing these decks, it's all about the visuals and the imagery and being able to pick something up from it. But this is just, you know, maybe there's growth with these sunflowers here, joy, happiness, but it doesn't speak to the sort of coming to terms with the past and viewing it through a new lens kind of evocation. It just doesn't bring that out for me. I just don't get it. Kind of a big miss. This is pretty standard issue 7, but the 9 has a very similar feeling. They could both be the 7 of Cups, right? So it feels like this crow couldn't make the choice. They couldn't understand which to pick, so they're like, I am just going to take it all. And that feels kind of counterproductive because that can, like, if you just take them all and you don't make a choice, like, what have you really learned, right? You're not really following your heart. You're not really thinking clearly and objectively, right? You're not really weighing your decisions if you take them all. So I found that to be peculiar because they're just very similar cards. This is just a little warmer than this, but whatever. That was interesting, creative choice. I do like that this Page of Cups is right at the edge of the water, which sort of is signifying he's beginning to dip his toes in, trying things out, but not really fully immersing himself in the act yet. He's still learning. He's still acquiring knowledge. He's still trying to figure out what's going to make him happy, what's going to make his heart sing, what does he love, right? But he's dipping his toes in the water. So I kind of like that the cup is right at the edge of the ocean. We have a little crab here to represent Cancer. The court cards here feel far more substantial to me than the court cards of the Pentacles, which is crazy because this card feels really, really rich. And that's what I should be feeling in the Queen of Pentacles, right? I do appreciate that it's here in the Queen of Cups, but I want to be feeling that in the Queen of Pentacles because she is rich and luxurious and earthy, and I just didn't feel that connection in the Queen of Pentacles, but I digress. So this queen feels as if the sea is her friend and she just feels naturally at home there, right? This crow just feels naturally at home at the sea. It takes me back to the Fool, okay, right? So it takes me back here where he is tentatively starting out on his or her log. And this journey has progressed to living in this watery, compassionate life. And I really like that. So there's a connection between these two cards for me personally. And in the Rider-Waite-Smith, there's a connection with the Queen of Cups because I always see that cliff in the distance behind her as the Fool's Cliff. So I like that there's a connection for me from this card to the Fool as well as in the Rider-Waite-Smith. So that is my opinions on the cups. And now we're going to move on to the swords. All right, here are the swords, ace through king. Pretty standard issue for these cards. Not really much to say. The six of swords. I like that there's feathers here. We know the six of swords are about moving beyond the conflict, moving beyond feeling defeated for something new to start again. And I feel like these feathers on the ground symbolize having to leave something behind in order to move forward. And perhaps whatever was stolen from us here, right? If this guy is a thief and he's stealing something from us, we have to leave that behind in order to move forward. We can't think about it because if we think about it, it's going to only hold us back and we're not going to be able to achieve what we need to achieve, right? Because I feel like here he's taking something from us. He's taking our swords. We had to lay them down in order to just get this whole issue to stop. So we have to leave it behind, right? In order to move forward. And then when we get to the seven, there's an opportunity to take it back. And I like to see the seven sometimes as taking back what rightfully belongs to us. There's a lot of different ways to read the seven. I actually think this is quite an effective seven of swords, but sometimes I like to read it as taking back what rightfully belongs to you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the obviously same exact thing, but it's like taking ownership back of your own ideas or thoughts or ways of doing things. The nine of swords here, I do really like this nine. I like how the moon is behind the swords, kind of like we are keeping out our emotions. We're trying to block ourselves from our emotions, but at the same time, by doing that, we're like caging ourselves. We're trying to shut out our emotions, but they're always going to peek through no matter what, right? And we're not truly trapped. This is a construct of our minds, but I find this to be a particularly effective nine of swords. I think there's a lot that can be read into it, so I do really like this. The king and queen feel very connected to me, right? They have become closer to the divine spirit, higher consciousness by working through the mental constraints that once held them back. That's sort of what I feel about these cards. There's a sense of balance between the two of them, well, almost like they intuitively can predict what the other is thinking or feeling. There's a clear understanding and respect for their individual roles. I feel like they work in tandem to help unlock the cages of other crows who have been trapped as well because they have gone through it all. They have a very deep and profound understanding of what it takes to get outside of yourself. So I really like this king and queen. I feel they feel very effective. The imagery is very simple. Because it's all about the mind, right? There's where it's kind of dark and murky in a lot of these. Here, it's very clear and straightforward and concise, and I really appreciate that. So, these were the swords, and now let's go to the aces. The aces, not the aces, the wands. Oh my goodness. All right, here we are at the wands, ace through king. Let's see, let's start with the ace. So the white feathers here, to me, we're used to seeing the yuds on the aces, but here I feel like these white feathers represent the divine guidance. And when seeking to leave the comfort of what's known, sometimes it helps to have that empowering feeling of having something bigger than ourselves guiding us in order to take action on what we need to do to get further, to grab the potential that's available to us. Sometimes we have to have that push from what feels like a higher source, and I really like that these white feathers here are kind of signifying that perhaps that is what it is driving this crow to capitalize on this potential. The 2 brings balance to the explorer as it gets ready to set off on its new adventure. And this 3 really works for me. I really, really like this 3. It's bridging that plan, right? It's taking the 2 and it's creating a bridge to the 4, to the commitment to the path. So we're planning here, and here we're committing. So here, this crow is bridging those 2 things. And the commitment to the path gets tested in the 5s or in the 5 when you're being challenged, when there's a debate, when somebody may be like, why are you doing this? What's the purpose of this, right? And you're having to sort of duke it out and battle it out. And that commitment's going to be tested here. Everything else is pretty standard, pretty straightforward, but the king and queen here feel a bit lazy. It's a bit underwhelming. And what I do like is this queen perched on the lion suggests comfort. She's very comfortable being in her position. She's gone through a lot. She's experienced a lot. And now she gets to be a guide for others. But the king definitely feels like he is looking forward and he is ready to go out on a new adventure and do some more exploring. But these cards, there's just a lack of imagination. They're like the same card, it's the same lion, like cut and paste. It feels very lazy to me. And these 2 cards are a big miss, like a huge miss. It's kind of sad. It feels like this was a mistake or this was a mistake. I don't know, but these just feel a little lazy. And that made me so sad because there could have been, she could have done so much more with these. But I think those little things that I pointed out throughout the video are why I don't love this deck. There are some wonderful cards like this, like the 9 of Swords. Even the Fool, I really like the Fool in this deck, that make me really like it a lot. But cards like this, the King and Queen of Pentacles, there's just some really big misses in this deck too. And that's what's keeping me from just loving it. So it's a deck I will continue to work with in a more limited capacity. But I would recommend it. It might be up your alley. Those things that I pointed out may not bother you at all. But her artwork, at the very least, is beautiful. She does a really good job. I like this sort of moodiness to her cards, to her art. It's very unique to MJ Cullinane. And that's why this baby is going to stay with me. So I hope you like this video. If this is a deck you are considering, I hope that this helped you in one way or the other. And I hope to see you guys again soon. Have a great day.